Okay, welcome back. Um, Today we want to start from development impact part 2. My previous video, the essay we talked about was on development impact part 1. Okay, so go through that video. I'll drop the link at the end of this one so that you can easily access it. So let's go to development impact part 2 essay. Now this essay is within 100 words, 0 to 100 words. So you make it as brief yet it is rich. Okay. Now this development impact part 2. The requirement here is how do you intend to apply your new skills and qualifications when you return home? You may wish to reference innovation and application of knowledge at a global, national, or local level, and to include intended methodologies and implementation strategies. Okay. Now remember these essays are linked. Just assume that your essay writing is like you giving a story about what you're gonna do and yourself, and then you're just breaking it into segments. So this means that all the development impact should link. They should all link from one to another. Now, after writing out your development impact part 1, you talk about what you're gonna acquire and how it's gonna help you. You also mention how what you're gonna learn, study, or the knowledge and skills you're gonna acquire, how it will help the choosing CSC team. CSC is Commonwealth Scholarship Commission. You've mentioned all that in your impact part 1. So it's a continuation now in this impact part 2. So first of all, you mention the skills and knowledge you're gonna acquire from your study. Remember in my previous video, in that first development impact, I said you have to go through the module of the course you want to study in the UK university. Okay, so you go through them, and then from that module, you know what you're gonna learn, the skills, the knowledge you're gonna acquire that you use for your projects. Okay, to achieve your goal. So you first of all mention those skills, okay, and then you link those skills, those knowledge to the area you're gonna make an impact, or let's say the sector. It could be in education, it could be in environment, it could be in other parts of the or other sectors of the country. So you mention it and then pick out one. In my previous video, we're talking about inclusion, like having a quality education for those who are um, who have special needs, those with disabilities. Okay, so you can talk about how you gonna use that skill, that knowledge, to ensure that those with disabilities can have access to education. Okay, now giving that example, you do not just stop there. You have to be very direct, very specific on how you will do this. Give very specific example, like for example, you're gonna gather people together, like you go from school to school and then you liaise with the government to see how they can make most schools in Nigeria, I'm using an example, most schools in Nigeria become accessible for people with special needs, so that they can access education and they can equally get educated like others, and they will not be deprived. Okay, so you have to be direct on the people you liaise with, you work with, and what you do, how you're gonna use these skills and knowledge to work with these people, to guide them so that they can make schools accessible for people living with disabilities in your country. Okay? So you need to be specific. Mention the specific thing you do. What will you do? Will you just write generally that you go when you come back you improve it? No, state what you do, who you work with, how you gather people to achieve this goal, and what specifically you will do to make this achievable. You have to mention all of this. Okay? Make sure that as you're writing this, it links to the CSC, Commonwealth Scholarship Commonwealth Scholarship Commission, sorry. Ensure that it links to the themes. Now, I picked the first one, that access, inclusion, and opportunity. Okay, so how with these skills, what you've learned, your knowledge, how will it impact in your country? How will it develop the people in your country? Very, very important. Link it, okay, and be very direct. Give examples. Don't forget. So, and this development part impact part two, the first thing you do, you mention the skills, mention the skills and knowledge you acquire. Remember your university, the information on your course in that university is what will guide you on this, to know what you will learn or what you study, you acquire. Okay, so after mentioning the skills, you link it. How will you use these skills? How will you now use these skills to impact in your country? Do not give a vague answer. Do not give vague answer like a general answer. When I come back, I will use it to ensure there is equitable education in Nigeria. No, do not do that. Be specific. Mention exactly what you will do, how you move around for this, the bodies you work with, you liaise with. And that's why it's good for you to do your research well on your cause, so that you know the organizations involved sharing this same goal with you, the bodies you work with, and what you specifically do to ensure that this your goal or your project is achievable using the skills you would have acquired from your study in the UK. Very, very important. And then another thing, don't forget to be very specific. Be specific. Don't give general answer. Don't give general answers. Then also remember to link your goal or what you do to your CSC teams. That's your Commonwealth Scholarship Commission team. Don't forget. Okay? So be very direct. Give very direct and examples. Very strong examples. Very, very important. Okay. So that's that about development impact part 2. So let's move to the third one, development impact part 3. What you expect will change in development terms following your studies, including the outcomes that you aim to achieve. Then B, the time frame for their implementation. The time frame for their implementation. And then the third one, who the beneficiaries will be. Okay. As a continuation of the first two essays you've written, you continue from there. Be very consistent with these essays. Like you can't just be talking about inclusion and then you come down here to talk about um, things like dealing with the economy. No. So all your essays needs to be linked. Be very consistent with what you're writing. Okay. So let me put this down. There should be consistency. So that means what you've written already from the beginning is the same goal you're going to be writing about in your subsequent essays. Don't forget that. Okay. So in this development impact part 3, you are requested to talk about the outcomes. What will be the outcome of this project or when you come back and you start working? What will be the outcome? The first one is the outcome. What will change? This study, this knowledge, these skills you're going to acquire from your study. What will it change? Mention those things that it will change. Like, for example, you talk about how you're going to increase education for persons living with disabilities or girl education. Okay? How you gonna work towards this? What will it do for the country? What will it do for your community? Remember in my previous video I said your community is your immediate environment. That place you aim to achieve a certain goal is your community. Will it change anything? Will there be any outcome? What is the outcome? What will it do? For example, you can say you ensure that most schools, at least 70% of schools around your state, are accessible for persons living with disabilities. With your knowledge, with the skills you acquire from your study, achieve this. You have to really state it, what the outcome will be. Okay. Then you talk about the time frame. The time frame. What is the time frame that this will be achievable? This time frame could be divided into short-term goal, could be short-term goal, short-term goal, okay? It could be medium goal, or it should be medium goal, and then long-term goal, long-term goal. Now your short-term goal is what you will do, what you achieve within the first period of time you're back from your study. What will you do within this time frame, this shortest time frame? You liaise with government, you liaise with social body, you go to schools, you work with principals, you work with schools directly. What will you do? You have to state it. Then your medium term, your medium goal should be within, let's say, within 6 months to about 1 year of your return from your studies. So these are short-term goals should be from 0 to about, let's say, 5 months. What will you do as you come back from your study? Mention those things you do to ensure that this outcome that you mentioned earlier, like example, in my outcome, I'll say I'll ensure at least at least 70%, let's say 70% of persons living with disabilities receive equitable of persons with disabilities receive equitable education. Persons living with disabilities receives equitable. This is your outcome. This is what you hope to achieve. Okay? This is what you hope to achieve. I'm just using this as uh, an example. This is what you hope to achieve. Okay? Now, how are you gonna achieve this? That's what this time frame is talking about. How are you gonna achieve this? You talk about the outcome, then the time frame. Within my immediate return and 5 months, I will do this, I will do that. Be very direct, be specific, mention exactly what you will do. Don't say when I come back within my first film, you still be repeating the outcome. Be direct. Who will you work with? What will you do with the schools? What will you do? Just mention it. Then your medium term goal should be within roughly 6 months. 6 months to, let's say, about a year. About a year, okay? Then your long term goal is within 2 years upwards. 2 years upwards. So you have to mention it. I'll work with, I'll liaise with, mention the bodies. Be direct, be specific. Okay? Be very specific. It's very important. Be specific. Then you come down and talk about the third one is the C there is the beneficiaries. Who will be your beneficiaries? Who are your beneficiaries? Your beneficiaries are those who benefit from your project, from your goal. Those who benefit from that project you want to accomplish. Okay? It can be girls, it can be persons living with disabilities, it can be anyone depending on what you want to achieve. Okay? You mention them. Who are those who will be your beneficiaries? Okay? Who are they? You have to be very direct. Mention those people. Okay? And in which community? It's also good to mention the particular community you are really aiming at. You can say in social community, in River State of Nigeria, or in so place. Just be direct, be very specific. Okay. Persons living with disability in so place, in so states of Nigeria. You remember in your first essay, you've already given some figures. You've already given some figures. I remember that first video I did. If you've not watched it, I'll advise you go back to watch it. That first video I did, I clearly indicated that it is important for you to give date figures. So from that figure, how many percentage do you aim to acquire? That's where the outcome comes in. How many of those people? How many? You have to set realistic goals. Don't set unrealistic goals. Give the exact percentage your knowledge and your skills will really impact on. That is the essence of the outcome. Okay? Then you break it down further. From this thing I hope to acquire or I hope to achieve, the outcome I hope to achieve, how will I do it? That's where the time frame comes in. Within the short time I come back, I'll do so thing. I'll go this, I'll work with these people to do so thing. You have to be very direct. Okay? Then the long term goal, the medium goal, you state the same thing. Then the third one here, you come down and say, my beneficiaries are so people. In so community of so country, you just have to be very specific. I sure I will people living with disabilities, for example, are gonna really get educated. They will have equitable education because most schools will be accessible for them. You have to be very direct and give figures. It will give your essay more credibility. So we'll come down to development impact part 4. Okay, development impact part 4. It says, how is the impact of your work? How best could it be measured and evidenced? Please include details of what indicators are used to measure this impact. You may wish to detail small and incremental changes as well as more significant goals. Okay? So now what they want you to write here is to mention how you measure what you've done, your impact on the people. You have to give figures. For your previous essay, you've already mentioned a part of it. Give figures. How do you now intend to measure these things? How do you now intend to measure these things? Okay, so you write out the numbers. How many numbers of people you will directly impact on? How many numbers of people you directly impact on? Out of so percentage of people, how many? How will you measure it? How will you know you're doing something? How will you know that you're fulfilling your goal? So you have to give numbers. Give numbers. Okay? Ensure that you mention the yardstick you will use to measure it. Like for example, you can say out of 1 million people living with disabilities in this community, they are not educated. They are not educated. because they lack accessible education. Now, from this figure that you've mentioned, how will you know you are doing something? You're coming back from the UK for your course, your study. When you put them into use, how many numbers of people you would have touched? So still be consistent with the figure you used here. Okay. Now in the outcome, you say 70% of persons receive equitable education. Come here and really explain. From your previous that first essay, remember you've already given some figures out of social number of persons living with disabilities who lack um, equitable education. 70% of this figure, which would be social number. It's not compulsory you must give that 70%. Be very realistic of on what you are very sure you're gonna do. It doesn't matter if that percentage is lower than 70%. Just be very realistic. It could be 50%. From this figure, I'll ensure that 50 people would have gotten that education. Now, this impact for part 4 is just only trying to make you state how you will measure it. So from 1 million people living with disability in XYZ community of Rivers State in Nigeria, my aim is to help 50% of this figure, which is social number of persons, so that they can get educated because of schools that are inclusive. You have to be very direct. Mention these numbers. Be generous. Use these numbers. Okay. So from social people, I will impact on social numbers. Just be very detailed. Carefully explain what you do. Okay. Okay. From this 50% too that you want to impact, it can be you listing them out. You might say from this 50%, within so number of years, out of this 50% I want to impact, 10% from it will have been impacted. It can be from small, like you see the last sentence, they say you may wish to detail small and incremental changes as well as more significant goals. So you can list out how you will measure it from the small ones, from this small percentage, from this 50%, which is also time frame. At least from this 50%, 10% will have been touched. As it goes on, which is also number of years, 40% will have been touched, and then finally the 50% achieved. You have to carefully explain these things. Okay. So this development impact part 4 is just all about the figures, mentioning the numbers. If it is measured in percentage, fine. If it is measured directly in numbers, it's also good. But you have to state it. They want to see how far your project will go. How many persons will it touch? That is what this development impact part 4 is about. How many persons will it touch? Okay. Just give it in details. If you cannot achieve this 50% out of 1 million, 50%, let's say 500,000 persons, If you cannot get the 500 persons to be impacted at a go, you can split it. Out of these 500 persons, I would measure within so time, at least 100 or 200 persons would have really gotten that in equitable education. Ensure that these schools, these things you are mentioning, these goals you are mentioning, ensure that you are really sure you're gonna do them. So that's why before you start writing your essays, you need to do plenty research. Research on that part, on that sector you want to touch in your country. Research, find out the bodies involved in that sector. Find out the lapses. All these figures are things you need to find out. Find out the lapses, the figure that are affected in this particular goal. And then it is from this you'll be able to make out your indices or your measure out what you will achieve. Okay, so it is very, very important. So that's all about our first four essays. My next video, I'll touch the next one, the development impact part 5. Okay, so please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, and I assure you, if you bring out a good essay, you gonna really make it. Your essays, well, essays will give you a pass. So just take your time, carefully write your essays, give figures, but still be brief. So just pick on the main points, be specific, be direct, and explain all within confines of the words stated there. Like this development impact part 4, there are 100 words. Okay? So I wish you all the best as you start your essay. Watch out for my video for the next development impact. Okay? So don't fail to subscribe. Bye bye till we meet again.